You did everything right. You studied when your friends didn't. You stayed out of trouble when staying out of trouble was hard. You filled out every application, wrote every essay, sat through every interview, and then the letter arrived. Accepted. Maybe you were the first in your family. Maybe your parents stood in the kitchen and cried. The good kind of tears, the kind that say, finally, finally we made it. Finally, all the sacrifices meant something. And then America handed you a contract. $30, $40, sometimes $100,000, signed in a guidance counselor's office between third and fourth period, by someone too young to rent a car, but apparently old enough to take on debt that will follow them for the next 3 decades. $1.778 trillion. That's the total. That's not a typo. That's 43 million Americans carrying the weight of a system that sold them a dream and billed them for it every month until they died. But here's the thing nobody says out loud at your orientation. Nobody puts in your welcome packet. Nobody whispers to you while you're smiling in your campus tour photos. What if this system was never meant to be paid off? What if the debt is not a side effect, but the product? It didn't start as a trap. That's the part that makes it so devastating. It started as the most generous thing the American government ever did. World War II is ending. 12 million men are coming home, broken, exhausted, having survived things no human being should survive. And Congress, in a rare moment of actual decency, says, "We owe you. The GI Bill. Free college. Not subsidized, not loaned. Free. You served, you bled, the country pays. Period." And it works. It works so beautifully it's almost painful to read about now. Veterans flood into universities. The middle class doesn't just grow, it invents itself from nothing. Engineers, doctors, teachers, architects, an entire generation of working class kids who would have spent their lives in factories instead build the modern American economy from the ground up. For 1 decade, education is treated as what it actually is, a public good, not a luxury, not a product, a right that a society owes its people. Then 1965 arrives, and the language starts to shift. President Johnson signs the Higher Education Act. It sounds noble, and parts of it genuinely are. It wants to extend the promise of college to low-income students who couldn't afford it. Beautiful intention, real problem. But buried inside the legislation, quiet as a termite in a foundation beam, is the Guaranteed Student Loan Program. Private banks provide the money, the federal government guarantees it against default. Students pay it back with interest. Read that again slowly. Banks profit, government assumes zero risk, students carry all of it. In 1944, America said, "We will invest in you." In 1965, America quietly revised that sentence to, "We will make it easy for someone else to profit from you." And the worst part, it was presented as generosity. Senator, why not just fund the universities directly, like we funded the GI Bill? That was wartime, different circumstances. So peacetime students deserve less? They deserve opportunity. Loans give them opportunity. Loans give banks a customer for 30 years. It keeps the private sector involved. Competition keeps costs down. And if costs go up anyway, then students borrow more, banks earn more, the economy grows. What about the students who can't repay? They'll get degrees. Degrees create income. It balances out. And if it doesn't balance out, then they should have chosen a better degree. That last line, remember it, because you're going to hear it again, in a different mouth, in a different decade. Every single time the system fails a human being, someone in a suit will eventually say some version of, "You should have chosen differently," as if an 18-year-old is supposed to predict a financial system that wasn't yet fully built. 4 years after the ink dries on the Higher Education Act, Congress creates something new, the Student Loan Marketing Association, Sallie Mae. It sounds like a kind woman who helps students. It is not a kind woman. It is a government-sponsored enterprise, half public charter, half private profit motive, created specifically to purchase student loans from banks and inject fresh capital back into the system. The purpose: make sure the pipeline never dries up. Make sure banks never run out of money to lend to teenagers. Think about the architecture for a moment. The government tells private banks, lend to students. We'll guarantee it if they default, so you have zero risk. And if you ever run low on capital, Sallie Mae will buy your loans back so you can lend tomorrow. The bank has no downside, none, ever. The student has no upside protection, none, ever. Sallie Mae doesn't stay quiet for long. It starts packaging student debt into financial instruments, slicing your future income into tranches and selling them to investors in Tokyo and Zurich who will never know your name, never know your story, never care what happens to you as long as the yield holds. Your tuition check becomes a commodity on a trading floor before you finish your first semester. By 1980, they add the Parent Plus loan. Now your mother and father can go into debt for you for the rest of their lives if necessary. By 1992, they introduce the unsubsidized loan, and now interest doesn't wait until you graduate. It starts building the day you sign, while you're in class, while you're sleeping in the dorm, while you're 19 years old and worried about your midterms. You owe $27,000. Interest is growing at $4.50 per day. Nobody told you that at orientation. That information was not in the brochure. And still, at this point, you could theoretically escape. If everything collapsed, if life broke you completely, bankruptcy existed as a last resort. An ugly, humiliating, devastating last resort, but an exit. In the next era, they close it. Quietly, permanently, and almost nobody notices until it's too late. This is the part of the story that should make you furious. Before 1976, student debt was legally identical to any other unsecured debt. Credit cards, hospital bills, personal loans. If life destroyed your finances beyond recovery, you filed for bankruptcy, you lost your assets, your credit was wrecked, you suffered real consequences, but you got to start over. That was the American deal, the legal acknowledgement that human beings are not corporations, and sometimes life exceeds what any person can manage. Then Congress began dismantling that protection, slowly, almost invisibly. 1976, student loans can't be discharged for 5 years. 1990, that becomes 7 years. 1998, Congress removes the time limit entirely. No waiting period, no exception based on age or circumstance. No matter what happens to you after you sign, the debt is permanent, for life. The stated justification? They were worried about doctors and lawyers graduating with degrees worth millions in future earnings, then immediately filing bankruptcy to escape their loans before their first paycheck. The actual evidence that this was happening at any meaningful scale? Essentially non-existent. The lobbying money funding the push to change the law? Sallie Mae. And in 2005, the final door. The Bankruptcy Abuse and Consumer Protection Act extends permanent non-dischargeability to private loans. Private lenders, banks with zero government mandate, zero public mission, zero obligation to the students they're lending to, now carry the same ironclad legal protection as the United States federal government itself. You can discharge a gambling debt in bankruptcy. You can discharge a medical bill from a surgery that saved your life. You can discharge almost any financial mistake a human being makes. But not this. Never this. I've been paying for 11 years. I lost my job in the financial crisis. My balance has grown, not shrunk. Has the borrower attempted to repay the debt in good faith? I've paid over $30,000. I still owe more than I borrowed. That may be, but to discharge a student loan, you must demonstrate undue hardship. I'm 41. I live with my parents. I eat once a day sometimes. The legal standard requires a certainty of hopelessness. Courts have used that exact phrase. A certainty of hopelessness? Yes, you'd need to demonstrate that your situation is permanent, essentially irreversible. I signed this at 18. I didn't know what irreversible meant at 18. The law doesn't distinguish by age of signing. Certainty of hopelessness. They wrote that phrase into actual federal rulings about actual human beings who signed a document as teenagers and spent the next 20 years being processed through a system that had no legal mechanism to acknowledge that people break, that economies collapse, that degrees don't always equal jobs, that 18-year-olds could not predict the future. Certainty of hopelessness as a legal standard in a country that calls itself the land of opportunity. Now, the private sector pulls up a chair. You are 20 years old. You live in a neighborhood where college is the dream, the escape hatch, the one concrete path upward that everyone agrees actually works. A recruiter calls you. He's warm, patient, persuasive. He asks about your goals. He listens. He says this school can get you there. He does not mention that his recruitment training manual describes you as a prospect experiencing pain, that the script he's following was designed by people who spent real money identifying which neighborhoods, which demographics, which television programs to find people desperate enough to sign anything. Corinthian colleges, ITT Tech, DeVry, for-profit institutions that pulled up to 90% of their revenue from federal student aid, meaning they existed functionally to convert your desperation into government-backed cash, extracted through your signature, deposited directly into shareholder accounts. Internal documents revealed that Corinthian specifically timed advertising campaigns around certain programming to reach Black and low-income communities because their research showed those demographics were most likely to enroll quickly and least likely to have family members who would ask hard questions about accreditation. They weren't offering education. They were mining human vulnerability with federal dollars as the drill. Is this degree recognized by employers? Absolutely. We have strong industry relationships. What's the job placement rate? 80% of our graduates find employment in their field. Can I see the data behind that number? We'd love to get you enrolled first. Seats are very limited this semester. My cousin said the credits don't transfer to other schools. Your cousin may have had a different experience. Every student's path is unique. I'm going to owe $38,000. I need to know this is real. What's real is that you have a dream, and we can help you reach it. Where do I send the enrollment forms? One by one, these schools collapsed under federal fraud investigations. Corinthian shut down overnight in 2015. Hundreds of thousands of students arrived one morning and found the doors locked. No warning, no plan, no refund. The degrees they'd borrowed for, worthless. The debt they'd signed for, every single cent, still due, still accruing interest, still legally inescapable. The executives who designed those recruitment strategies, fine, living in the same houses, driving the same cars, never charged with anything. Here's where we are right now, today. You have the 1965 access to higher education at an average entry debt of $39,633 before your first paycheck. Tuition has risen over 1,200% since 1980. General inflation over that same period, 300%. Tuition didn't outpace inflation. It lapped it 4 times over, and it's still climbing. You have the 1972 pipeline expansion, but Sallie Mae is now Navient, which was permanently banned from servicing federal student loans by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, not for an honest mistake, but for systematically steering millions of struggling borrowers away from affordable repayment options and into high-cost forbearances that made their balances grow, nearly $2 billion in settlements. The conduct stretched across years and millions of accounts. They were paid by the government to help you. They used that access to make your situation worse. You have 1998's legal framework, permanent non-dischargeability, the one that protects the lender unconditionally forever. Total outstanding debt today, $1.778 trillion, 43 million Americans. The counter is still moving. And you are 34 years old. You graduated at 22. You have made every single payment on time for 12 years. You just checked your loan servicer portal. You owe more than the day you graduated. This is not a glitch. This has a name. Negative amortization. Your monthly payment, set by an income-driven repayment plan designed to be affordable, is mathematically smaller than the interest building on your balance every month, so you pay faithfully, month after month, year after year, and the number grows. More than 55% of all federal student loan borrowers have lived inside this math, not because they were irresponsible, not because they didn't try, because the system was structured so that the most financially vulnerable borrowers, the ones who needed help the most, would end up paying the longest and the most. Meanwhile, Harvard's endowment just hit $56.9 billion. That is the fiscal year 2025 number, while students in Cambridge take out loans to attend the school sitting on top of it. Yale's endowment hit $44.1 billion, an 11.1% return. Princeton, $36.4 billion, 11% return. Stanford posted 14.3%. These institutions collectively hold more investment wealth than the GDP of most countries on Earth. It grows every single year. It is largely tax-free, and the students who are supposed to benefit from being adjacent to this wealth, the ones the admissions brochure was made for, are leaving with six-figure debt and a degree the job market may or may not reward. Tuition went up again this year. And in Washington, something almost nobody covered, the Congressional Budget Office quietly revised its projections. Student loans issued between 2015 and the present, originally projected to generate $135 billion in profit for the federal government, are now expected to cost $205 billion, a $340 billion reversal. The machine broke even the institution it built. But if you are Christine Faro, 73 years old, none of these institutional numbers are abstract. She borrowed for degrees in the 1980s. Through interest capitalization, missed payment windows, and decades of compounding, her balance has ballooned to $250,000. She lives in a 400-square-foot rented room. She is waiting for Social Security garnishment to restart, not because she was reckless, because she was 22 years old and believed what they told her. She is not alone. 452,000 Americans over the age of 62 are currently in default on student loans. The federal government can legally seize 15% of their Social Security check. The protected floor, $750 per month, was written decades ago and has never been adjusted for inflation. Seniors are choosing between medication and loan payments, between heat and minimum remittance on a debt from a degree they earned before their children were born. This is the endgame of a system built piece by piece over 50 years by people who would never have to live inside it. Not every trap is built by villains in rooms laughing. Some are built by accumulation. One quiet legislative amendment, one lobbying contribution landing in the right campaign account, one line inserted into a budget bill at midnight in language no 18-year-old would understand even if they thought to look. Each piece written by someone who told themselves it was rational, efficient, market-driven, necessary. Each piece aimed at someone else's child. Somewhere right now, tonight, an 18-year-old is sitting across a desk from a financial aid officer who is using the word opportunity, who is sliding paperwork across a table with a helpful smile, who is not explaining interest capitalization, who is not mentioning the 1998 bankruptcy exemption, who has a quota to meet and a brochure designed by people who understood human psychology well enough to know that hope at 18 is nearly impossible to argue with. That silence in the room, where the true terms should be spoken but aren't, was not an accident. It was designed that way. And the signature at the bottom of that page is the most expensive thing that young person will ever do, before they're old enough to understand what expensive really means.